I'm here with hypnotherapist Zoë Clews, and one of her specialities is dealing with that inner critic that we all have, that inner voice. So today she is going to explain how we can deal with that as a sort of little exercise to get rid of that inner critic that I'm sure we all have. I know I certainly do.
Yeah, we all have one. Now, I actually call it the negative introject because this is the sort of the model that I work with. But yeah, it's the voice in our head that can often be really unhelpful. It will say, you can always tell it's the negative introject, also known as the inner critic, because if you start to pay attention to your own inner language, it always uses the word you. So you haven't called that person back. You're not as successful as them. You look old. You know, all of the stuff that it says. It's quite abusive actually sometimes.
It's self-abuse, yeah.
Yeah, it's horrendous. So, and the more difficulty you went through in childhood, and also if you've had some really, really big adverse experiences as an adult as well, the more powerful the negative introject will be, because it's kind of made up of trauma. And if I could surgically remove the negative introject, I would be a billionaire and everyone would be happy, right?
Yes, they would.
So I can't do that. So we do the next best thing, which is working to get that negative introject down as much as possible. It really is the key to one of the main pillars to happiness, because if we could just turn the volume right down, then we'd all feel so much freer and so much happier.
Yeah.
And one of the most important things I want everybody to remember or sort of realise is that everything it says is a lie. Because it's always rude, isn't it? It's always rude. It says the most unhelpful things.
Why are we so rude to ourselves? It's unbelievable.
I think it's just conditioning, isn't it? It's societal conditioning. It's kind of generational trauma. It's so many things. It's what we experience. Or if we had critical parents, that the voices that we listened to when we were younger, they're going to be the voices in our head.
Right.
So, first thing to remember is everything it says is a lie. Now,
I love that.
So. There's a lot of methods, and I've worked with a lot of these because I've been really determined to help people get their negative introjects down and also get my own down, which I've managed to do. I mean, it's a process.
Yes.
I think it's an ongoing process, but the more you practice this exercise, the more it sort of becomes embodied, and the less you need to keep doing it. It's less automatic, but you do have to pay attention. So like anything, it's practice. So I use something that's called, it's like a sort of psychological model, it's called the unit. And if you think of it like this, we have our negative introject here, and you can always tell it's the negative introject because the language it will use will be you. As I said, it'll just use you did this, you haven't done that, you're not good enough, etc., etc. Now, underneath that, we have our inner child. Now, what happens is the negative introject attacks, and the inner child starts to get quite distressed. So you'll probably all notice that if you have a day when your inner voice is really attacking you, criticising you, belittling you, berating you, you will start to feel worse and worse and worse. And then we get stuck. What's actually going on that we wouldn't necessarily know is that we're stuck in this loop of negative introject attacking that sort of more vulnerable part of ourselves, our inner child. And we start to get stuck in this cycle of judgment and anxiety, or judgment and distress. So that's what's going on, but what's the solution? So the unit is this: negative introject here, wounded inner child there. So we all have an inner adult. That's the part of you that pays the bills on time, gets up to go to work, says, I need to call this person back, etc. You take care of stuff. What most of us don't have is kind of like a kind, loving inner parent, especially if we didn't have kind, loving caretakers when we were younger. So what we need to do is almost like an intervention here. So you've got the negative introject attacking the inner child, and the inner child starts to get more and more distressed. So we need to do an intervention here with the kind, loving inner parent and the adult to the inner child. So how do you do that? So it's just about imagining the part of you that gets distressed as a little kid. And as you do this, you might see yourself as a little kid, or you might remember a photo or something like that. If you're not particularly visual, it might just be a feeling. But imagining just connecting with that part of you and being really kind and reassuring to him or her and letting them know that they're safe. The more that you do this, the more this negative introject goes down. Now, I've been working with a negative introject for years and years and years, personally on my own, but also 20 years of working with clients. and is actually by far the most powerful technique that I've found. So rather than trying to fight off the negative interject and telling it to go away or swearing at it or arguing with it, there's no point. It's about connecting with that sort of more vulnerable part of you and letting him or her know that she's safe, that she's okay. Sounds a little bit vague, and it sounds quite technical.
It's so funny you should say that, because it's something I've always done.
Oh, that's beautiful.
To myself.
Oh, wow.
And we all have that moment, and I've always been aware of my own inner child.
Oh, I love that.
And I call her Little Glinny.
Oh, good. See, this
I
is
have
perfect. You already did
I have
it.
a name for her.
Yeah.
And I would, over the years, I have instinctively, in the moments where I felt low or vulnerable, I mentally go as in a very maternal, loving way, and I cuddle and look after Little Glinny, and it's just a little mental exercise
Beautiful.
that I've done. But it just sort of.
Isn't that interesting that you've naturally done that?
I've naturally done that, and as you just said, it's one of the most effective things.
It's the most effective.
It has been life-changing for me. Yeah,
Oh,
it really has. It really has been.
I love hearing you say that. This is saying, because I'm introducing a lot of clients to this now, and they're all coming back and saying how important it is, and how it's. I do think it is the most effective thing. So if you notice that your head is going completely, really going to town on you, beating you up for this, that, the other, past, present, future, go in rather than fighting that or trying to escape from it with, like, I don't know, alcohol or distraction or whatever it is you want to use. Just go into that little you and start to. But the fact that you're already doing it, it's just embodied.
Well, I think it's just for me, obviously, it was like an instinctive thing.
Yeah, it's really healthy.
Because I have, I've spoken about it before. I have gone through bouts of anxiety, which is, anyone who's had it knows, it is absolutely
it's horrendous,
awful, and you have to find your ways through it.
You do.
So
healthy ways through it.
You have to find healthy ways through it. So yes, I came over over a period of years, I came through strategies, and that was one. And I found it incredibly self-soothing.
It's beautiful, and you can just do things like nobody needs to know, because you can feel a bit silly. You can start to think, oh, I feel really self-indulgent. You start to feel a bit ashamed when you're doing it, but actually, no one has to know. It's like a quiet sort of internal process.
For me, it was always, everybody does it whenever they want, but for me, it was in bed at night in quiet moments is when I did it.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really powerful.
Oh, well, all I am saying is that I have used that, and it certainly worked for me.
Yeah, it's a lovely thing, and like anything, it's kind of, for me, it's a more powerful sort of daily practice than meditation. That's just my personal take on things.
Well, that is a meditation, because if you sit still, any moment of sitting still, or inner thoughts, and whatever form it takes. I mean, just having a walk in nature is a form of meditation. So if you sit and any kind of soothing like that, or processing things, or just sitting, or taking the mind to that deeper level, that is meditation, or distracting, or taking your mind away from the chatter and the negativity.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask you, because one thing that's different from what you said to what I said is, I didn't necessarily equate it with the inner critic, which I do have, but I'm aware of my inner critic.
Yes.
So I always think awareness is important. It was more when the inner child was in distress and was causing me things like anxiety, that I became the parent to that child.
That's it. It's becoming the inner parent. So if you start to listen to them with the awareness, you listen to your own inner language, and you'll hear the negative interject will always go you. It will say you.
Yes.
And if you hear I feel distressed, I'm anxious, that's your inner child. So you can start to notice in a way
the difference.
Who's,
So does the inner parent go for the critic, or does it just go straight for the child? Right, which is what I did.
So you bring the inner adult in that's like, it's okay, we're going to be
brushing the critic aside, and you're going to look after.
Going to the inner child, it brings down the anxiety. And as well as it being like a meditation like Use which is great, what you can do, because I'm on the go all the time, it's kind of like a living, walking, talking, breathing self-care practice. Whenever because you'll forget all the time. Have a cup of tea, check in with your inner kid. go to the loo, check in with your inner kid, you know, whenever you have a few moments.
Well, you know, and it depends how intense it is, whatever you're going through, because sometimes it's just a little, sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a lot to handle. So, oh, that's lovely. And that's, you know, that's such a lovely little exercise to do. So,
let us know how you get on.
I hope that's really helpful.